Hi, welcome back. This is the second of the webinar series on bush survival and managing in times of crisis. In this particular webinar, I'm going to look at how in bush survival we teach people to manage in times of isolation and when they're faced with moments or periods of boredom. Again, let me put up a screen slide for you. So like many of you, I'm now in isolation. I'm actually in complete lockdown. I'm not venturing outside the front gate. In fact, this is my front gate, and the building that you see behind me, behind that gate, is the office that I'm now putting this webinar together from. The thing about bush survival and isolation and boredom is that you need to keep things in context, and I mentioned this in the last webinar. And certainly when you're in isolation, one of the things that you can consider is that, as you try and put the situation in context, is that things could be worse. And here's two examples of people who've been in a very confined space for a long period of time with high levels of stress, and yet they've survived it. And one was the famous story of a Hong Kong seaman who was picked up during the Second World War after spending 133 days at sea, and an English couple in 1973 whose yacht went down near the Galapagos Islands, and they spent 118 days adrift in a small life raft. So it is possible to live for long periods of time in isolation, and this really puts in context our own experiences, which you've got to be honest and say are fairly mundane when you compare it against these examples. So I want to give you 8 actions for overcoming isolation and boredom, and these are based on not only experiences of these types of people, but also other research and experiences that people in bush survival have had. And so here's 8 quick guidelines for you. The first is keep in mind the big picture. Most people who've lived through a significant time in isolation have talked about having a bigger picture that's kept them motivated, be it about their family or about their place in the universe. And certainly with ourselves as we go into isolation, we need to keep in mind the bigger picture of the fact that the reason we're in isolation is either to protect our family or protect the family and other people. So keep things in context. Having a routine is absolutely critical. Setting up a daily routine that approximates as close as possible to what would be your normal routine, when you would normally exercise, when you would normally eat. Setting up that routine and sticking to it is critical. Remaining active and purposeful. Finding opportunities to do things. When you're in isolation, you often have time and the opportunity to study new things, to learn about new things, to listen to webinars like this. So take that opportunity. Set short-term goals. People that have been in isolation or have been on life rafts or whatever have talked about having these short-term goals that they try and set up, be it collecting water, be it the number of fish that they might try and attract and capture, capturing a seagull, whatever, to survive the situation. So having short-term goals, and having short-term goals in isolation is also critical. And those goals might be, in my case, today is to put these webinars together for you. Tomorrow is to read some particular research that I'm looking at on creativity. So each day has a purpose. Also, when you're in a group, it's important to give everybody a responsibility and a task, and you see this exemplified time and time again in survival stories and survival situations. Giving people a responsibility and task and a purpose that helps them, and it also helps the group. Finally, and it's not in my 6, but I think it's also critical, is improvisation. If you have the opportunity, see if you can get hold of this film called The Martian and revisit this film in terms of the things that I've spoken about both in the last webinar and this webinar, and you'll see these themes coming through very, very strongly indeed. So that's Matt Damon in The Martian. In terms of improvisation, Matt Damon grows potatoes, and this is just an example, and I'll give you a couple of things that you might think about in improvisation. I've actually done this in my own family. We just dug up a little bit of the backyard, and where some potatoes are shot, you just simply cut them in half, or and put them in the ground about 10 centimetres down, and I've already got little potato plants coming up. In about 16 weeks' time, I'll have heaps of potatoes. The other thing is, if you're wanting to exercise, have a look at the TRX system, look online about it, and you don't have to buy one, you can just make one. And this is a way of exercising in a very confined space, and you could have a very significant workout that you could do each day that would maintain your fitness, or actually build your fitness while you're in isolation. The final thing is get back to some of the old-fashioned ideas. In Bob Cooper's, and Bob Cooper is a former instructor with the SAS regiment and in survival, and a brilliant bush survival instructor. And Bob puts out a little survival tin about the size of a soap box, a block of soap, and in there is a small pack of playing cards. And it's just a reminder, little things like playing cards can really help overcome boredom and can create a bit of fun in a survival situation. So look, there's a few ideas for overcoming boredom and isolation. Have a great day, and when I come back, I'll start talking to you about how to build a strategic plan. Until then, good luck. See you. Bye.